here it is. Here are the actual figures, and this is what's really going on. So I guess that's really what I wanted to ask, if there's some way that could be developed for that.
I think that's a great idea, Ed. Interestingly enough, last week, because of a opinion letter, I went ahead and did that research and
In the paper last week?
Yeah. Out of every dollar that goes in a tax increment, the city of Hayden is 12.73 cents. That's it. So 87% of the tax increment that Hura is getting would have gone to other agencies.
See, that's my point though.
It's a huge number.
That needs to be out there and available, because people who read that letter, my turn, whatever you want to call it, took what was said as if the city's good, all that 500 some odd thousand dollars would have gone to the city. And the actual number, when you break it down to 13% or whatever it is, I'm just doing quick here, 13% of that 500 and some odd thousand is what the city would have got, which would have been 50,000, 60,000?
$65,000.
Yeah, nowhere near, as was alluded to or alleged or asserted in that letter, that would have covered a full year of the sheriff's. You know, that kind of stuff. So that's the information that really needs to be easily accessible to everybody. So,
It's really unfortunate.
yeah, if there's a way that could be
Information's
developed, I
misrepresented.
think it'd be real good.
John's analysis, though, is not in our financial statements. Things have a stamp where you do that.
Should there be a response to the letter?
I penned a comment, an opinion piece that will run on Wednesday of this week.
Good, and I wrote one too. So, but I haven't sent mine in.
Well, adding on to this, I guess, if I can, since we're having some of the discussion here, is in today's environment, political environment, what have you, and the focus that's being put on, in this case, Hura, and as well as other things, the more that actual factual information has to be rebutted. When it's put out there in public, you have to come back and say, whoa, hold on. Here are the facts, here we can verify, these are the facts, and hopefully people will then look at them with an open mind and not an ideologically driven, I don't care what you say, it's this, which is kind of what happens. But the more truth and transparency and factual information, I think is better for everybody.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ed. We will take your suggestions under advisement. We've got exciting things coming up later in this agenda that is going to give us a little bit more horsepower, so we can, in terms of administrative horsepower, project horsepower, so we can go ahead and pursue things like that.
Good.
So, thank you. We have another visitor.
Yeah, I'll make a brief public comments. Tying into what Ed said.
Again, you need to introduce
Sorry, yeah,
yourself and
I'm
then-
Calvin Freitas. I live in Hayden, just off of Miles Road.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love more
Hold on, your
transparency.
last name, Cal?
Freitas. And, on that topic of transparency, I would love to see things like the financial information, the minutes, the agendas for these meetings posted on the Hura website. And just updating that website in general, a lot of the content's out of date. So I think that would be, and informing the citizens, that would be very helpful for us to better understand what has been happening historically, the background of Hura, especially people that have only been here for a couple of years. We don't know all the history, and some of you have been involved for quite a long time. So just putting more of that up there, I think, would be very useful.
I would direct you to look at our website. The agendas are on there, the project list is on there, our audits are on there. And
Okay,
our
I
budget
might have
list
missed
is-
some of that. Is that the HaydenUrbanRenewalAgency.com?
Yep.
All of the audits are not on there, there's a header, he's correct, it is.
Through 2019, the audit is on there.
Okay.
So, and we
That's
will
a couple of
update
years
our,
missing, right?
we will update our budget resolutions as well. So we'll try and get that as
Before you
as
leave,
accurate.
we asked once before about the video of the meetings.
Yep.
And I'd ask you again in this transparency theme, why
going on YouTube.
do you come each week?
Because
for the transparency?
There are people that want to know what is happening in these meetings in addition to what's in the minutes, and
So where are they published?
it's on YouTube.
On YouTube?
Yes.
Are they on Telegram?
So, yes,
Where else?
those are the two places currently.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any guess that's the end of our visitors or public comments. So the consent calendar, all items on the consent calendar are action items, minutes, bills, and financial reports. Were there any questions on any of those items or edits? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
I'll make that motion that we approve the consent calendar as stated, items 1 through 3.
Thank you, Matt. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Steve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Rhonda, you're muted.
I am muted. I agree, aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and there's, it looks like it's unanimous, so no nay votes. Okay, continuing business. The first item on there is the number 1, Executive Director Professional Service Agreement. That's an action item. The agreement was sent out as part of your packet. I'm going to direct any questions on this agreement to Pete, and/or I think probably Pete could answer questions better than anybody else.
Well, Welch Comer prepared the agreement, I just revised it. I had a few concerns that I want to change, so it's a standard EJCDC form contract that they use all the time for gigs like this.
Is there any way we can move the mic closer? It's hard to hear. I'm sorry.
I was just saying that Welch Comer prepared the contract. I just revised it and changed a few things. It's basically just a form agreement they use all the time, so it's not like I drafted it from scratch.
Did anybody have any questions about the agreement?
I do. And I'm gonna need some help from Brett. We as a city council approved an agreement with Welsh Comer for design services for one of the intersections, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Multiple intersections.
Probably more than one. So if we as a city have hired Welsh Comer, and then as the executive director of Hura, that Hura could be funding those projects. There's no conflict there?
I don't see how, because the services that were
Executive
provided.
director doesn't vote, so it's not really an issue. Unless Hura and the city are entering into an agreement for funding, and the design professional is already identified for that project, like as Welch Comer, then I would suggest that they completely recuse themselves from handling anything, but they don't vote, so.
But are we asking the executive director to bring possible projects to the table? So that's something we want to look at.
No, any of the projects we've, as we've sat through these various meetings and workshops with the city council and staff over the last 2 years, we've asked the city to bring projects to Hura so that we could team with the city to fund those projects. It's not in this scope of work that the services provided by Welch Comer would be to look at projects within the Hura district and bring them forward to the board. I guess if somebody called them up and said, hey, we have a project, they would communicate that in their role, but we're not looking for them to bring projects to us per se.
So I want to be clear with our legal counsel that he sees no conflict of interest.
Like I said, not unless the design professional was identified as Welch Comer when an agreement with the city was entered into. Then in that case, I would suggest that they recuse themselves and lead the discussion on that issue. But they don't vote, so they probably wouldn't even need to do that. But just to be safe, I would recommend that they completely recuse themselves.
Okay, next question. Do we have an opinion from the city's legal counsel that there's no conflict of interest?
We do not at this time, or not that I'm aware of. Not one that has been formally shared with me.
So I would not agree to this until we received a letter from the city's attorney assuring us that there's no conflict of interest. I just want to make sure, I mean, this is real close to perceived conflict of interest.
John?
Yes,
John? I guess my question when I read through the contract is I was unclear, how much are we gonna pay and what was the, is there an agreed amount of time and the hourly rate for the assistant? For the executive director assistant position or?
there was hourly rate.
Is that
Yeah,
and have we agreed about how many hours that they would be working? Is that the $65 hourly rate or the $250 hourly rate?
there were different rates, and I haven't found that page yet, different rates depending on which professional was providing which service, Rhonda.
Because for Hura at the time, they would were only asking for the executive them on projects. That's the city that would engage them on projects, correct?
Well, that's correct, on design projects. They may perform projects for us, i.e., if we go forward with an expansion or changes in the district, we could ask them for a proposal to evaluate the proposed expansion, what the impact is in terms of acreage and what the impact is in terms of assessed value. They provide those kind of services to other urban renewal agencies in the area. So that may be a project that they perform to us as a professional service.
Okay, and so have we discussed how many hours this position would be allocating a month for them, roughly?
It's at our direction, Rhonda. So if we don't provide projects for them to do, if we don't ask them to do something, it's the hours that they're committed to provide at our meetings and preparation for meetings.
The executive director position.
That's correct.
Right, because Rob would no longer be doing these duties. This individual would be doing these duties.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So a follow-up to her question, I'm looking at page 1, which shows the standard hourly rate schedule. Where is the executive director rate on this schedule?
That goes
I looked at that too. Rob, do you remember when they made the proposal? They must have had a rate, because we talked about the pricing of the others.
So it's not included. I do recall Melissa saying that she was a senior project manager.
Which is $210 an hour.
Yes.
And what are we currently paying the city for Rob's services an hour?
I don't know that exact amount. We negotiate,
I don't know. But
I think we write checks, John, in the neighborhood of $225 a month to the city.
I think I just signed one for $1,200 or $1,400.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
in
12
our
or 14,
schedule.
okay.
Yeah.
so it's gonna be, right now, it's probably a combination of my time and Sandy's time and the hours that we track. And it may only be in the, I'm just gonna throw out a guess and say in the $70 to $80 an hour.
And Rob, how many hours a week do you put in for Hura? Or do you go monthly?
It's every couple weeks, I feel like time card, but right now it kinda has been more of a monthly. It might be 5 to 6 hours, to, prep for a meeting. And then on meeting day, it might be another, probably about 3 hours, 3 to 4. So that's putting the agenda, together, that is putting the facts together, that's kind of doing all the clerking duties, like, putting it on the website and sending the packets out to the board members, making sure that we have a quorum. You know, it's, so right now it hasn't been a ton of time, but if we're trying to get some other things accomplished, I would expect those hours to go up.
So how many total hours do you think a month or sometime, yeah, a month?
Right now, I'm gonna say, I'll just say 15 to 20. And that's probably high.
If you take our target of $80,000 a year for this position as a part-time position, divide by Melissa's rate if it's 210, and divide by 12, you get $32 hours. So our thought process of an $80,000 a year bucket for the job would, at this 210 rate, would provide for 32 hours a month, or 8 or 9 hours a week. Which means essentially 1 day a week working on this. If the billing rate is really 210, that strikes me as pretty strong for this kind of work.
And do we get the same individual?
Yes, I think you're getting Melissa Cleveland.
She's just like Rob. Not exactly.
So I will say that there is a difference between, I believe, from what the city charges and what a consultant charges, because of, I don't believe that the city includes, the true cost of overhead. Doesn't-
Probably wages and fringe benefits, but not facilities,
But not facilities, not, printers, copiers,
computer support.
computers, yeah. Having worked on the private side before.
Hey guys, it's Mike. I have a quick question. Are we sure that Melissa is a senior project manager and not a project administrator? That's a pretty big difference in the hourly rate.
I think that she's a senior project manager. It sounds like we've got enough questions that, what I'd like to do is maybe entertain a motion to table this. And if people would take the time to shoot me an email with questions so that I can pursue those questions with Welch Comer and our council, and addressing Matt's request with the city's council, coordinating with Brett on that, we will try and get that done. So would somebody like to make a motion to table this action item? Or do we just go on without taking any action?
On, not taking action.
Okay, I will still ask that if you guys would share your questions with me, I'll do my best to try and get answers for them. Okay, moving on. Go ahead, Rhonda, sorry.
No, I'll formulate a question to you later. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we could spend the whole meeting chasing this one around. Hayden City Hall remodel participation agreement. This is an action item. Alan, are you presenting this?
I think at the last meeting, the Hura board agreed to fund the City Hall overage up to a certain dollar amount, which I don't
$250,000.
250,000. And, this is just the agreement to, I guess, support that.
So this agreement has been, reviewed by both, Pete and, Tom Jovic, the city's attorney.
Any further discussion? Questions for Alan or for Pete?
And just a question of what category will the funding be classified as? Is it a grant? It's not an OPA? Or does that really matter that we have a definition of the funding?
We've got a line item in our budget, what was that? Since I found our budget. 4 projects within the Hura district, and I think that would, per our plan, that would qualify as a project in the Hura district.
Yeah, the plan references civic buildings or community facilities, so it's authorized by the plan.
Yes, Steve?
Alan and Brent, when we talked about this at the last meeting, there was quite a bit of description about enhancements to the original plan and remodeling in the office area beyond the elevator and that kind of stuff. And then, according to the newspaper report, which I recognize as the newspaper story, the description at the council was different than what we had here. And I was troubled a bit about that.
I don't know what the differences are, so
What was the difference? I don't remember.
Well, the discussion at the council level had lower dollars to be spent than what was discussed here and what's in this agreement. And there were some particulars which I don't remember either, frankly, but
well, I
I
think-
remember being concerned about it.
I think, Steve, the bid was $213,000 above our budget, and Hura agreed to fund up to 250, knowing that there could be change orders. Is that the difference we're talking about?
Could be,
Okay.
could be, because.
Then that was a decision by this board, not,
We had estimated in our budget that it would be about $500,000, 500,000, and the bid came in at 713. And so, we did ask that we would cover more, but the board felt comfortable or desire to pay the 213 and then went up to 250 if there was to help pay the overage. But the lion's share, I think, of maybe the increase in cost is the elevator. The rest of the improvements there are some, but, I don't know if you guys included the plan in the documents last time, but that's what it was. I read the article, I didn't remember, but that's the gist of it, is that you guys were paying the amount that it was unanticipated by the city, plus up to 250.
I think the agreement that's included in our packet almost mirrors exactly or does mirror exactly our number one new business item of last month that was unanimously passed to not exceed the $250,000. Any further questions?
I was wondering, is there any, as we approved more money to the bid, assuming that there might be change orders, is there anything we would not like, probably not like to scope based on the fact that we approved more than what the bid was, assuming there will be change orders, but.
So I know, so
Should we attach a copy of the bid to this?
Hura agreed to fund $250,000.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed $250,000
$250,000.
over the $500,000 budgeted amount.
So to answer or to address Randy's question, I think that we want to be very careful that our agreements are providing funding for projects that the city has identified and let them administrate and manage changes and stuff, because we don't want to be managing their projects. We want to be a funding source for them that falls within our plan. Did I phrase that correctly, Pete?
Very well put.
John, the agreement, and I'm sorry, I can't pull up the agreement doesn't specify that we'll pay up to $250, does it? It just says the $213?
No, the
No,
agreement.
it says not to exceed 250,000.
It does, okay.
Yeah, it says 213, it says that's what the overage was from the bid, and we agreed not to fund it.
And it also says, under, item number 2, financial project, the agency financial responsibilities. Agency is financially responsible to reimburse the city an amount not to exceed $250,000 after the city's budgeted amount of $500,000 has first been expended.
It's Mike. The way I read it is exactly how we discussed it. If I recall correctly, the 250 number was in the event of any change orders and to prevent the city of Hayden having to come back to us to get any additional funds if they were needed. The reason it was, not to exceed 250 is that on the off chance something does come in below budget, then we didn't write too big of a check to the city.
Thank you, Mike.
So Brett, I have a question. If it happened to be over 750,000 total project, say it goes 5,000 over, the city could pay for that without any problem?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would have to come back to council for change order approval.
Yeah, but we have funds to take care of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? I would entertain a motion for the item number 2, Hayden City Hall remodel participation agreement.
So moved.
Thank you, Mike. Can we have a second? Thank you, Matt. Is there any further discussion? Point, Pete, and I know you watch this like a hawk, especially since Matt looks at perceived conflicts of interest all the time. With Matt being a city council person, is there a conflict of interest in his participation in this vote?
It could be construed as a remote interest, but it's a pretty thin argument because the city's it's not a for-profit corporation and it's not, but it could be construed as, just in case, it would be construed as a remote interest. I would recommend that he not vote.
Just dotting the i's and crossing the t's, so.
So was I improper in seconding the motion, so we may have to get another second?
I think seconding, you were just moving the matter along, so as long as you don't vote.
I'll remain with my second. I
Thank you.
recuse myself for the record on the vote.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and committee person, Mr. Roder has recused himself from the vote. Are there any further discussion? We need to do a roll call vote on this, Rob?
Okay, Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yeah.
Mr. Meehan is absent. Ms. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Thayer,
Yes.
Mr. McIntyre,
Yes.
and Mr. Roder is recused.
Thank you. Item number 3, continuing business, urban renewal area expansion. It says it's an action item. It was intended to be more of a workshop item. Rob, I don't think we have anything we actually have to act on this, do we?
No, can,
So
do you
the
mind,
long-
do you mind if we jump around a little bit
No, not at all.
and catch, the 2 items on new business?
Can we, let's just close the circle on item number 3. I don't believe that there is any action to take on the urban renewal area expansion unless there's another member of this group that believes that there is a action we want to take.
I think the intent was to talk about,
I would like to do that under long-range planning. Because it's not an action item,
alright,
so. Okay, so let's move into new business. Item number 1, City of Hayden request for reimbursement of the Ramsey Road sewer design. Ellen, I think you're up again.
Again, at the last HER meeting, we brought a list of projects that are needs for the city that fall within, the district boundary. These are projects that are needs. We talked about this project, which is this gravity sewer that runs just north of the airport to Lancaster. And the board did not take any action on it, but they did ask the city to bring an actual agreement to act on. And so, we took it to city council. They did want to request, so this request is from the city council to have, ask her if they would be willing to fund the engineering design portion of that project. I think it's their interest to be also to participate in the funding or funding the sewer project, but we don't have those dollar amounts, so I can't. And you guys basically said you really wanted specific dollar amounts, so we said we'll cross that bridge down the road if so be. So this is a request for to get reimbursed for $185,100 for the design portion of the sewer, which would go in the Ramsey Road extension, basically from the 24-inch main, gravity sewer main that's out on the west end or east end of the airport, north to Lancaster, underneath the Ramsey Road extension roadway. I hope I got that. Not too many words to make it confusing, but enough to make it clear.
Thank you, Alan. So that memo with the agreement for reimbursement for the Ramsey North Gravity Sewer was included in your packets. Pete, this has been reviewed by both you and City Council again.
By Fonda and I believe. I know I reviewed it, so, and it's basically the same agreement that we just approved, except the numbers in the project was changed, so.
Thank you, Pete. And Brett, I saw you nodding your head that Fonda reviewed it as well.
That's my understanding.
Thank you. Questions, discussion?
I guess I have comment and concern. The city of Hayden was provided by the federal government $3.2 million in CARES Act funding for infrastructure projects, sewer, so on. And it's my understanding that those funds have not been allocated and decisions have not been made by city council on where those fundings will be allocated. And my concern about this project is that this sewer will service a large majority of the people north of our district. And I wonder if this project would not be better served for the city to utilize their CARE Act funds.
probably one, but I can check. When the, ARPA money, which is what the $3.2 they came from, that was like the third iteration of some federal dollars. Originally, that was for water, sewer, or, technology type. And so we had engaged and talked with developers to the north, primarily Hayden Canyon folks, in trying to figure out how we could fund the H6 lift station. Because we are committed already with infill and with numbers in Hayden Canyon, and we do not have enough capacity to provide service for all of those areas. And so in talking with and trying to put something together, we started with an LID that the council didn't seem real interested in that, and so we're looking at a financial arrangement where, and you're right, Rhonda, it has not been completed or voted on by the council. We're in process in working on, but that the city would use approximately $2 million of the ARPA money to build the lift station, which may be around $4 million. And then we've got our cap fees, almost $3 million, probably about $2.8 million, that we would use probably $2 million of our capitalization fees to build the lift station, which is basically the key component to make all of this happen. And
We have
so
2 gravity sewer projects to make it happen too.
and so we have, 2 gravity sewer projects. And then there's also a force main project to go from the lift station over to the treatment plant. That is not our responsibility. And so in answer to your question, what we have presented to the council for the last 2 budget cycles is a proposal to spend $2 to maybe $2.2 million of the ARPA dollars on that project, and $800,000 on the Honeysuckle and Ramsey intersection. So those are the 2 projects that we've tried to earmark those monies for and are moving forward with. And then there was $100,000 to $200,000 left that would be some miscellaneous projects like an emergency generator for City Hall and something else. So when you look at what we have to accomplish, we do not have enough money to do the gravity sewer and the lift station. There's multiple reasons, I won't go into it, why it makes more sense for the city to work on the H6 lift station. So hopefully that answers your question, but it's a good question around it.
I have a question, follow up on, I thought we took $300,000 of ARPA money to pay for 3 more deputies for this one-time money.
No, we use our one-time money, so to speak, not the ARPA money.
It wasn't ARPA money?
It was not ARPA.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer your question, Rhonda?
It did, lead to other questions, but that isn't really relevant to this bill, thank you.
Rhonda, you're welcome to call me offline and talk to me about that if you want.
Thank you, Lynn.
Okay, any further questions or discussion on this request for reimbursement?
I'd like to explore further why this is a Hura project. It's easy to justify, for example, the Hayden Avenue remodel, because our mission is fixing old stuff that needs to be fixed. I don't like to use the words that are in the enabling law. Can't think of them at the moment, but suspect we don't have 24-inch sewer pipes in very many places in the whole city. Is that roughly right? Probably, Alan?
Only 24-inch sewer pipe you have in the city is the sewer pipe that was put in by, the development north, in the north end, that I think, there's some connection here on that, an agreement I'm not that familiar with.
So Alan, correct me, I was just gonna, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that the city reached out to us and asked us to help with the design of this and also in the future with the cost of this sewer line is because the city has, I don't know how many millions of dollars of federal dollars to extend Ramsey Road, north to, Lancaster, and this sewer line needs to be installed underneath it, and that's not included in the federal grant. Isn't that correct?
The federal grant is a transportation grant, will not fund any utilities. And so all the utilities that need to go in, before that road is constructed, needs to be built now. Or you can roll it into the federal project, but you have to actually put your money in an escrow, the cost of it in an escrow to the state prior to the construction and the bidding. And then you actually end up paying Davis-Bacon wages because of the federal dollars tied in. So it actually ends up bringing the cost up even more than what it would be to try and do the work ahead of time. But either way, it has to be paid for by other funds.
And this was on your list of priorities, this was one of the higher priorities that the city of Hayden brought to Hura to help for financing within the urban renewal district.
It came up, it moved up the priority list for the city about 6 months ago or 4 months ago, because originally the federal dollars were funded to only build half of the Ramsey extension. And it was anticipated the north part, which this sits under, would be done in like 2027. And we thought we had some time to find the funding and do that. And then about 4 months ago, they actually funded the entire project. And all of a sudden now the city has to find the dollars to construct the utilities that go in that roadway and actually get them built this coming summer. So it did move up priority-wise substantially just because of the opportunity that we have federal, well, the fact that we have federal dollars that we basically have to meet on a timeline, so.
Thank you, Alan.
So the land adjacent to this sewer line is in the district, and it is, say, non-residential, so it's
All light industrial.
it's light industrial zone today.
Sorry for interrupting you, Steve, I just wanted to get the reason why they brought this out, why they brought this forward to us as a high priority project for her to consider funding.
So are you saying, Rob,
But
that
it will be,
in your mind at least, some of the areas served by this is the area that it runs through, east and west of the Ramsey Road extension, that existing industrial zone land?
Yes,
Is that landowner participating in the sewer project?
that,
I've not heard that. So the only reason to put a 24-inch line in there is so we don't have to do it again in the next 50 years.
This will be a 12-inch line, probably. It's only a 12-inch line. It'll tie into the 24.
What I'm headed toward is that we are building, which is not wrong, but I just want to discuss it, sewer capacity to the very boundary of the city limits. And the most significant beneficiary is the adjacent commercial property who's not participating. And the land on the north side, which at some point in time will probably become residential land, like the pieces to the east that Aspen and others have developed. I have no idea who's gonna be the developer or who's gonna own that land next to this sewer line in the future. Nobody knows. But I have some reservations about using Hura money for things like sewer. You know, last time we had said, we had discussed some ideas on the board up there about what we're gonna do with our remaining $13 million or whatever it is. And we talked about things that make Hayden a nicer place to live and things that address the needs of the current residents in the theme of a community center. My resolve continues to not let Hura become an attractive pot of money to substitute for utility stuff that has other sources of funding. If the Honeysuckle and Ramsey lift station needs to be rebuilt, I think it should be rebuilt with sewer fee proceed money, not Hura money. And the H6 lift station ought to be financed by those residential developers who are using it. So both of those fall short of what I think is our charge for what we do with tax increment financing from new growth. I understand the notion that Alan suggests that we've got a time box. And one of my thoughts, I don't think it's practical, but I throw it out. Should Hura loan the city a couple $1 million, and when other sources can be found to reimburse, why we get the money back. But it's pretty difficult to get other sources when the project's already built, so.
We don't have any way of getting other sources, period, right now. We got the sources we have, and those are the sources we got, so.
I'm not very enthusiastic.
I was gonna say, I don't disagree, Steve, however, as we've asked the city and we've done these various workshops to ask about how we can work as an agency to support the city, they've come to us with a very small number of sewer projects that it seems like it makes sense to invest in so that the city doesn't spend more money in the future, more money that they don't have. And they have some transportation projects, and the rest of the projects we discussed, the actual big dollar items are the things that you mentioned to make our city a better place, parks and community center, things like that. We haven't put together a detailed budget on it, but it seems like we should have the monies with the income stream that's generated by the increment to be able to achieve all these before our sunset date of 12/31/29.
Brett, is there a reason why we can't include things like the Honeysuckle Ramsey rebuild and others that we've had to rebuild? I think we had to rebuild one down on Honeysuckle further west at the foot of Strayhorn after it was originally constructed. Why that can't be funded out of fee revenue?
Well, with the sewer funds, with, the capitalization fees, like I said, we have, probably, it's about 2.8 million in capitalization fees. We have looked at lift stations as, a project that we can utilize those funds for, but if we use it, we will be out. At some point, the city got behind in sewer, whether it was from the NIBCA lawsuit or whatever, the city's behind on the amount of money we have for sewer and road projects. And we have to be careful that, as people come in, they're paying their cap fee, and that is tied in with a specific formula under the Supreme Court. And so we can't ask them to pay to build this and then also to pay their cap fee. And so the way they're paying for it is through their cap fee. And there's a little bit of a chicken and egg, there to the north. If you've got, a look at this as, Hura money can help with economic development projects and on that north side, that is light
Do
industrial.
we have in the construction, I'm trying to separate the cap fee, which is paid by new development, from the operating budget of our sewer facilities. And I would wonder, I'm guessing, that our operating budget should have a line, in addition to electricity and repairs and all that stuff, should have a reserve for replacement line. Which builds up every year, or every month, every year, and provides funds to replace pumps that after 25 years fail.
That's
So-
correct. So the H6 lift station is not in existence.
No, I'm talking about Honeysuckle and Ramsey.
That's a road project. That's to do the roundabout in Honeysuckle and Ramsey. There's no lift station.
Honeysuckle and Ramsey is not in our district. Am I missing something?
Yeah, that's why they're
Sorry.
funding it out of the ARPA funds for that, priority turnaround.
So yeah, if you thought, that's not a lift station in Honeysuckle and Ramsey. That was, so a road project and the lift station were how we were looking to use the lion's share of that 3.2 million that we're getting for ARPA funds.
The lift station that he's referring to, it's hard to hear a little bit, so for clarification, is for the, Hayden Canyon project, is that correct?
It's the whole north side, as well as infill. I mean, this gets into Allen's area, but when you look at, I don't know.
I think I can do it.
Okay, go ahead.
The H6 lift station is to support all development, basically, and I'm just gonna generalize a little bit, it's not the exact boundary, but it's basically all the industrial area and all development north of Wyoming up to Lancaster, and including Hayden North, and including Hayden Canyon. So that, it will include all the industrial area in the Warren K will go into it. The industrial area by the Lancaster Market will go into it. The industrial area across the street from the Lancaster Market and that development will go into it. So that is what so it isn't just new development, it's a substantial amount of existing development also. So that's what it's designed to do. That, at some point, the city had decided that it was easier to do a temporary until we could get this infrastructure built, which allowed development to continue out there, which is good development for the city because it's industrial and it's commercial. But that spare capacity we had to allow that to happen is now dwindling at a pretty rapid rate. So now we have to build that infrastructure to support what has been built, basically. And we do have some funding, and we're using some of the ARPA funding to do that. And we're also going to be working with developers to help fund that project. This is just a small little add-on that will be out there. Basically, we'll provide service to the Roy Glick, which was Roy Glickman property, I think, which is what most people know it as. Which would be an 8-inch line in itself, but we're upsizing the line. So the cost that is expanding is only the cost between an 8-inch pipe and a 12-inch pipe. That is what we're talking about. The 8-inch pipe has to go in no matter what. If you don't put the 12 in, then you're gonna take the 8-inch pipe out in 15 years and put a 12-inch pipe in, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So does that help, Rhonda?
So how is the 8-inch pipe being funded?
Well, it's gonna be funded by the city. But we're asking her if they would participate. That's what this request is for.
So it goes to that last large undeveloped parcel where Ramsey Road extends through.
So is this request for $185,000 for design money?
Yes.
And then do you expect a subsequent request for the
8-inch to 12-inch construction dollars?
As I understood, the council would be interested in requesting that also, subsequent, once we have an actual number.
So there's more to come, probably.
There would be more requests to come. Again, it has to be, the city's gonna have to fund it somehow, so. And it is a project that's in the district, and it is a need, and there is a shortage of funding at this point in time.
Well, I agree with all that, and I agree
So-
with the need to do it now. I just don't
So-
agree with the source of the funds.
So I'm just.
Let's go back and readdress the LID. Most projects like this that I've been associated with in other communities wind up touching the people who will be the beneficiaries to pay. And you mentioned a moment ago, briefly, one of you did, that the city, it was proposed at the council, but the council didn't seem to be interested in LID. Roughly is what I think I heard.
So we're doing something, an alternative to that, meaning a financial agreement where, and Alan mentioned this, that there are two sections to this gravity sewer. There's two different projects. The first one is the one we have a draft financial agreement that we need to go through, where the developers will finance that portion of the gravity sewer, but that's further south from what would benefit most of those developers up there. Because, so if you go from the point where the 24-inch down to Wyoming, well, actually it has to go all the way down to Dakota. We're asking them to enter into an agreement to fund that, and do that. We're paying for the design of it, but we're gonna ask them, to fund that. And anything over what's not their responsibility, we would have an agreement where we fund back using cap fees. But, you know, I think to get further north where that turns, we're talking a different group of
This wouldn't benefit those developers at all.
This is a different area, and it's the opportunity, since the road is going to be built all the way up to Lancaster. We're talking about getting a sewer in, and that would benefit east and west, for economic development. And we're basically, you know, when you look at O&M, our operations and maintenance money, that is replacement, and that's the daily operations. That's a different pot of money. We wouldn't use that really to expand the system.
Understand.
And so what we have in the capitalization fee areas is between $2.8 and $3 million. And we're planning on spending the lion's share of that plus $2 million of ARPA to do the lift station. So we are.
And then funding from the developers to cover that.
The remainder. And the remainder of that, we're trying to hold in reserve for on the west side. We have another H8 project that we may end up having to help with or participate in. And so we're not trying to, we're using the lion's share of those capitalization fees for this lift station because of where we're at. We're running out of capacity on that north side. And
This is complicated because, you know, our observers, critics, there's a lady here at the last meeting who stood up and said she thought we were all akin to the devil because we're giving money to private developers. And we all righteously denied that, I believe correctly so. And then the Brent Reagan editorial or the column last week alluded to the same thing. And we put ourselves in there's an awkward situation here where I'm in favor of providing utility services to the industrial development land that's south of Lancaster. That big green block up there that's in our district. what I call the Alagala land, but it's got a series of owners, family owners since then. But I'm cautious about using Hura money to build into that area without participation by the property owner, who's the beneficiary. And so, while I wanna defend that, because I want more opportunity to build things like the Odom facility in Hayden, and other smaller ones, but big ones like that don't come along very often. But I also would really like to have that property owner participate. And if they're unwilling to do so, they just wanna sit quiet and be smart negotiators and let us build it, then with stubs, which we wanna do because we don't wanna cut the street. That's a dilemma.
Does the sewer line running through that property in itself, will that trigger a tremendous value increase in that property that will start generating increment?
If construction follows, yeah.
Well, if or if not.
But probably not by the county assessor. I don't know, that's a great question, Randy, but I don't think very much.
That property would be worth much more. The sewer line running through it and the taxes would. go
Right now,
up.
it's ag exempt right
But if
now,
it's ag
so
exempt, then
yeah, they're probably getting, I don't know, not a significant amount of taxes off of it, just
I doubt they're
moving
going-
into industrial and commercial is,
For what that was purchased for by those families, I would doubt that they plan on remaining agricultural exempt. And I think the sewer line, I don't disagree, they're being smart negotiators, they know there's a project that has to be done, and
yeah, I don't just.
they're allowing the project to go through their property, I guess, for a price. I wish there was a way to get a latecomers agreement, an
Yeah.
additional latecomers agreement for those stubs, but I don't.
Can we do that?
Only if they agree, only if the property owner agreed to it, probably,
You could,
because you'd have to have a.
you could make a recommendation to the, impact fee committee to actually have there's a term for it, where different zones have different impact fees.
So we would
First-
recollect
first-
after the fact?
And that way, whenever any construction there happens, you could go ahead and say, for this particular block, that zone is the whatever zone. And you could, if the committee, goes through, if the consultant goes through all the, equations and stuff and says, okay, the value of that investment was X, and divided by this amount of development, this is what the additional impact fee is, you can go ahead and do that. So you can have impact fees that aren't the same throughout a city. So that could be one way to go ahead and recap some portion of that investment.
So if we did that, we could hold true to our answer to our critics that we're not spending public money for the benefit of the private sector developers. I think that's an important distinction that we need to be, well, as Ed talked about, being transparent about. That if that's what we're gonna do, then if we're gonna approve this particular one, I think, since we have some time, I think we have some time.
Well, that's what we don't have is
That's
time.
what
And that's
I'm
why
moving forward, Steve, whether this board supports this or not, I have no choice. I have been put into a box by the federal funds. So I have, this is not exactly how I would have liked it to come out, okay? This was not a high priority project for the city until such time as the roadway got funded for 2024 instead of 2027. So I am like at a point where I have to make decisions. Otherwise, we're gonna be in a position where we won't be able to get the road project done with the federal funds that we've got, which is losing a substantial amount of money for the community.
Alan, with this project, I believe you mentioned the total cost being around $800,000. Is if my memory serves me correctly.
I think I
These
have that.
funds could be allocated through the CARES Act, so this is an immediate need for the city to put this road in.
I can't speak for Brett, Rhonda, but I think he said that council is, or you guys have already talked about where the CARES Act money is going, what projects are.
Yeah, and
priorities.
we've talked with the developers as
It
well.
hasn't been voted on yet, though.
It has not been voted on. It's just, been, discussed in two budget iterations, on how we're gonna spend it. Keep in mind, we are in the process of acquisition of right-of-way for these same properties. That makes it difficult for us to maybe discuss further, with some of this. And then also keep in mind, and I realize, we're talking about two different pots, but, the city gets reimbursed for that investment through capitalization fees. Is how, the argument would be how we would get our money back. Now with Hura, if you're putting that forward, that's a little different argument. But it does, in my mind, assist in the economic development of those areas, which I think is a primary purpose for.
And at this point in time, there is no developer. The city is seeing this road and sewer as a future need that they really need to connect the city up to Lancaster Road and beyond. There is no private developer involved at all. Normally, this person would probably be coming to us and saying, hey, I wanna build this huge, or this building, or there's no sewer here, I'll build the sewer, can I get the money back if I create increment? Which is what would be the normal path, but in this case, there is no developer. I think it's very likely that there would be future development there, and that sewer would drive increment.
It's kind of going backwards, yeah.
It's different than what we would normally see, but there is no developer here this time. It's just a road that needs to be built, but I can see it creating tax increment in the future and helping to develop an industrial area.
Yeah, let me back up for a second. I just wanna say, I totally agree with what you said, Steve, is I don't think that we should be using HURA dollars that would benefit, directly benefit commercial development that doesn't have a stake in it, an investment in it. The only reason I support this particular one is the investment that the city has secured from the federal government to extend that roadway. And to me, it just makes sense that we do the infrastructure at the same time so that we are not detracting from value in the future. It's just, to me, it makes sense that you get the right size sewer in the road prism, so it's done right, so that people 15 years down the road from us don't look back and say, why didn't they do it this way? So, which is some of the challenges Alan is dealing with right now is, trying to get sewer from the north part of the city down to the lift stations.
I agree.
Yeah.
But Randy, whoever owns that, when you say there is no developer,
It's not now, currently.
well, there's nobody with a project who wants to proceed, but there is a developer. The developer is the property owner. Somebody bought that, and they didn't buy it for farmland.
I don't believe they did.
They bought it as development land. And so, the best outcome, of course, is if they can maneuver skillfully enough to get somebody else to pay for the sewer extension. Because there is an improvement in value and certainly an improvement in marketability for either serviced land or development sites. So I just don't wanna go past this discussion without, I guess,
The other difference.
feeling like that property owner should pay for it, and Brett makes the point that there's a little finesse here with purchasing the land. I presume though that's directed, or is specified by formula, the land is
has to be purchased at the appraised price, and no more. And so if the land is appraised as ag land, then we're buying pretty cheap right of way. Is that kind of where we are in the discussion?
We're buying the land, we're anticipating buying the property at the appraised value. That's.
So it's probably gonna
what I
get
can
appraised
share.
with sewer or without sewer?
Would be without sewer, the offer's already been, it's already been appraised.
Are you expecting that you'll be able to, that land purchase will be completed before you build the road? Or are you, cause in some cases, those land purchases aren't
I,
completed,
I don't know at this point.
and then the negotiation over the property value goes on for a bit. It should be the value before anything happened. A lot of times they will give you the ability to go ahead and proceed without.
And still
finally-
squabble over the price.
And still squabble over the price.
That is where we're headed on this, but it's my, and I'm not a legal person, I'm not a land appraiser or any of that, so, it is my understanding, however, the value, regardless of where we're at, should be at the time that the agreement is entered into. In other words, you enter into an agreement, again, it's just my understanding. And even if they develop the land after that, you don't negotiate on the new developed value of lots. You negotiate on the value of the land at the time. But again, you know, going in front of judges and attorneys and whatnot, those lines can be blurred a little bit a lot of times, and I can't speak to that, so.
I have a question for Brett. Having gone through the Supreme Court twice with NIMCA, sitting in on the mediation, and my understanding is that the tap fees that we collect, which is what's being proposed to help fund this project, we can't use M&O, but we could use cap fees, is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so let me continue with that question then. My understanding is the bottom line of that lawsuit was that what was called the equitable buy-in. In other words, what is the value of the system in the ground today, and what are you charging for a unit of that? So if we can't, so the question is, can we collect fees, cap fees, for future expansion? Because this is a future expansion. Can we use those fees, or are we gonna be in another situation where we're in a lawsuit?
So my understanding of, from the lawsuit is there's a line of distinction on how you compute the fee, and then there's a line drawn, and then how you spend them. And the Supreme Court was very specific on how you compute them. There was some language in the note on how you spend them, and I think that note says we can spend it on expansion of the system. But again, I don't want to give a legal opinion. I can't do that, but that's my understanding of the case. I do think, I see the bigger issue is, if we had the money, the way the developer is participating in that is by paying a cap fee. When we have an agreement with the developers and they are pre-funding, and they're expecting for any portion that's not attributed to their piece a reimbursement, they're still paying once and not paying for coming in and paying for the line and then paying the cap fee. And so you're entering, I think it's a little bit of an awkward discussion to have here, again, because we're negotiating, and to throw on top of, okay, we're negotiating with you and now we're asking you to come in and pay for a sewer line. There's some legal implications there.
So I asked the question because that's what Ron is going, she's identified that the ARPA money should be used, and so we first need to clarify what we can use before we, and I know we have to move forward, I mean,
Yeah.
we're in a box, but we wanna do it right.
Yeah, I've explained how much we have. We have about, 2.8. If we spend it on that project, which for me is less important, than to get the lift station in. Because if you don't have a lift station, you have nowhere to take it. So that's kind of third. The reason why it's important is because it needs to be done next summer to get it underneath the asphalt. And, but if we were to prioritize how we should spend what few resources we have from the CAFES, for us, at least for me, Alan may disagree, that's probably not maybe our highest priority.
So the possibility of having OPAs with any of these developers is out of the question to fund this?
The developer has to come forward to do an OPA. Yeah,
Well,
if it's somebody willing to go ahead and develop it and then put the line in and have that agreement with Hura for compensation off the increment. Right now, there's not a developer saying, I wanna do a subdivision there, or I wanna go ahead and develop this. That's the challenge, is there's a difference between the two. You have a landowner. The landowner is gonna sit there and say, okay, I'll sell you my land to extend the road the way through and put your sewer line in, or you have a developer, and the developer is going to, I wanna take that property and turn it into something that has higher value. So right now, we have a landowner.
Another difference would be the developer would be saying, I wanna bring the sewer
Exactly.
line in as far as I need it, and I want it to be the size that I need. And then they would go back to the city, and the city would say, we really want that to be a 12-inch line, not a 6-inch line, so go to the urban renewal district and see if they'll help fund the additional expense of getting that up to where the city needs it, beyond where what your project requires.
I think, Robert asked that we be timely today simply because the city council is meeting after we are. So we can we've had a lot of discussion on this. I don't know that anybody feels like a motion at this point. I was going to ask that the city do a memo of why, to address some of the concerns of the board members, and that we re-examine this issue next month. Does anybody have?
John,
Yes.
Go ahead, I agree. Two brief things actually for me before we move along, and I know we have to. This board did, move and approve that we would provide funding to city projects on a case-by-case basis based on the city's priority list. We all agree to that. Clearly the city has done that for us. This is not the most exciting project. We can't point to a roundabout or a park or anything else. But again, we do need to, try to deploy the funds that we have to benefit the city of Hayden. Us sitting on a pile of money at the end of the district goes out to all those taxing districts and doesn't necessarily benefit the city of Hayden. In my opinion, what does benefit the residents of the city of Hayden is increasing the amount of commercial tax areas as opposed to residential tax areas. And, by doing something like this, we can shift some of that tax burden, because as we know, the budget can only grow by a certain amount every year, away from residential and back towards commercial and industrial. So I understand we're not gonna make a vote on this. I just wanted to quickly weigh in. I apologize, I'm not the person.
Mike, Randy just mentioned that if somebody does want to make a motion, and I will say that again, if somebody does want to make a motion, we could vote on this today. Or we could wait and get additional information from the city. I did just check the meeting minutes, and we had discussed this in each of the two prior meetings. I had 2 presentations so far from the city.
I would move to approve the city's request for this.
Okay, we have a
Chairman,
motion.
once again, since Mr. Riller just recused himself on the previous matter, he should recuse himself on this matter too, to be consistent.
Thank you, Pete. So So on item number 1 under new business, City of Hayden requests for reimbursement of Ramsey Road sewer design. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I would second it.
Thank you, Randy. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I'd like to understand, just as a matter of good principles, what we're really signing up to in total. I don't need a hard number, but if we start with 185, is the next bite another 200,000 or another 1.2 million?
It was 500 and, if I read this correctly, where is it on here? I just saw it.
I don't think that,
Not to exceed 185, 100.
Is this specific item is not to exceed 185, 800? 100.
The wish list we got, I thought was the pipe part. I don't remember. Was it intended to be the design part also?
Not in this one. This one is just for the design, 185,000. And as a note to that, the city, on the design portions, we usually are paying for that anyways. So that would have been a cost for us. So if that alleviates this issue of whether the developer would have paid for this or not, on the design cost on the first gravity sewer, we're paying for that design part, but then we'll be asking them to build. So you'll have another step where, once we have numbers, our intent is to come back and ask for construction, and you'll have another shot at that. If you don't wanna do the construction, then you can still say no to that.
To answer your question, Steve, about estimated cost of the project, the sewer portion, this was provided to us by the city 2 meetings ago. This is sewer project 2.06.8, Ramsey Phase 3, that's correct, Alan?
The second, it is project 2.06.8.
Yep, and their estimated amount for the construction cost was $502,000.
Looking at a sheet where that same says 800,000. So in addition to this 185, there's another $500,000 to come for the pipe construction.
Yeah, after they have,
Complete the project there is, yes.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I would call for a roll call vote.
I'd like to
I'm
propose,
sorry.
Mike, would you accept an amendment that asks the city
Absolutely.
to pursue some reimbursement scheme from the benefited property owners? Whether that's a latecomer's
I'll tell you what, I
agreement
can withdraw
or
my motion and you can make a new one if you wanna do that.
Randy would have to concur with, or agree to withdraw his second.
I agree to withdraw my second.
Okay, the motion's been withdrawn.
I move we approve this $185,000 request. And ask the city to come back to us with the next request for construction. So this 185 is unequivocal. We'll pay for the design. But when the request comes for the construction, that we best to design a scheme, either latecomer's agreement or a change in the cap fees, so that Hura dollars get reimbursed by the beneficiary, the property that the improvements go through.
Adjacent property holders. Okay. Do you have that, Rob?
so I've got, approve the original, request of 185, 100. And then, and subsequently, when the city comes back to request funds for construction, that's to require beneficiary to participate in one form or another of the financing.
That's close enough.
I think we all agree.
Okay.
Don't know if it's possible.
I mean, we don't, I don't know what that loose enough that, yeah,
Brett
I
can
can
have
offer
fun
to
to
you,
look at
Brett,
it.
that I've just been through this in Post Falls, only the numbers were bigger. And your position as the city is surprisingly strong. So don't be reluctant with the land seller to include the conversation about the benefits of the sewer, because the land seller is only entitled to the appraised value of the land. And they really can't say no to the sale unless they wanna test the city's conviction about condemnation, and most people don't wanna test that, and most city councils don't wanna do it. But it's part of owning this kind of land.
Okay, our clerk's gonna kick me out of here soon, or kick us out soon, so, under new business, item number one, excuse me, we have a motion, a second to approve, the city of Hayden. Do we have a second? Nope, we don't have a second. We have a motion, and now we have a second from Randy McIntyre. We have a motion, and a second for the city of Hayden, a request for reimbursement of Ramsey Road sewer design, to be approved, or to be accepted as, submitted in our packages, the agreement for reimbursement. The motion also asks that the city come back in the future with a request for construction with a proposal or a plan for some level of reimbursement from adjacent property owners.
And that, just for the purpose of this discussion, that doesn't have to be at the time, it has to, maybe it can be in the future, so we become the interim financer for this, which I think is an appropriate use of the funds. But in the end, the beneficiary users should wind up including this in their costs.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? This is a roll call vote. Rob, if you do the roll call, please.
Okay, Mr. Rutter's recusing, Mr. McIntyre,
Yes.
Mr. Thayer,
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Meehan is absent, Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes. Okay, thank you. That was a good conversation. And kind of helps us kind of look forward to what we're going to work with the city on. New business, item 2, Anderson Brothers audit engagement authorization. This was included in your packages. Point of disclosure is Anderson Brothers CPAs are the CPAs that provide services to myself and my wife personally, and to several of the companies that we own. I don't know whether that is, there's no material benefit to me to participate in this vote, but I will let our council weigh in on that.
Yeah, I would just recommend that you recuse yourself to move things along here.
Thank you. I will recuse myself. Would you please note that, Rob? Yes, Rhonda?
Do you, I need to leave the meeting, do you need my vote on this, or?
Yeah, I think this is gonna be our last item, actually. We've gotta get out of here in like 5 minutes, so we're gonna push stuff going forward, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
On the Anderson Brothers audit engagement authorization, do we have a motion to approve?
I can't find the fee.
4,500,
4,500.
which is, we had budgeted 4150, so it went up a little bit.
So we have a motion by Mr. McIntyre. Do we have a second? And Mr. Roeder has given us a second. It's a little quicker than you were, Steve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. It's also a roll call vote.
All right, so help me out, who made the motion?
Mr. McIntyre
And I seconded it, Rob.
and Mr. Roeder.
I really liked when Sandy was doing the clerking duties. Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Mr. Meehan is absent. Ms. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Thayer,
Yes.
Mr. McIntyre,
Yes.
Mr. Rudder.
Yes.
I recuse myself. We have reports and Other non-action item discussion, before Rob gives us a quick overview, because we're really need to get done in 5 minutes. I'm gonna ask Rob to take the work that we did on the long-range planning and take that larger copy with different colored highlighters, and mark through there what people's thoughts were. And then I will get that scanned so we can send it out to everybody. And then we can put that on our agenda.
Everybody's thoughts on one,
On one
trying
page.
to differentiate between, or do we just say that, hey, this is, based on everybody's input, this is the canvas?
I think you throw everybody's thoughts separately, just highlight it separately, so that Steve could say, well, this is why I thought these were important, and I can say, this is why I thought that was important.
Okay,
So,
I can do that.
Do we
Thank
get
you.
responses from most of us?
yeah,
Great.
We're still looking for Randy's.
it's right there. I'll just put,
Matt, I'm not sure I got anything from you.
okay. Rhonda, if we do not have any more action items, if you need to leave us.
Oh, great, I appreciate that, thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night, thank you. Rob, we've got 4 minutes, so.
So I'm gonna give the floor to Brett. We had the community center, Hura had mentioned that they would be willing to participate. The facilities planning committee met. So right now, I think that the next steps would be to kind of develop an overall plan, and as far as, like on the planning end, maybe we're gonna probably have to hire a consultant, figure out what we want, or what the citizens want, in a community center. Probably eventually hire like an architect to do some space planning, that sort of thing. So we're gonna be working on that on the city's end, and then bring back something to Hura that makes some sense and gives you an opportunity for some input and hopefully a direction forward. So, you know, besides the space planning, where? Maybe we're looking at different, pieces of ground around the city, in the district. Maybe it doesn't land in the district, but, you know, in order for her to participate,
It needs to be in the district, yeah.
it would need to be in the district.
Sounds good, thank you.
So Rob, you wanted me to remind you of something at this meeting, was that we were?
I think it was probably the community
Yeah,
center.
were we gonna ask, the city was gonna ask her whether they would participate in this study?
We actually, we said that we would.
Yeah, so I think there was already interest, but, and so what we need to do is we need to formulate a kind of an outline plan. Because I think this group, before they spend money, kind of likes to see where it's going, where it's leading to. Is there a solid plan, to get from A to B?
We talked about coming forward and working on steps in this process, because on the city side, we are interested in looking at doing something with the community center, and there were a couple ideas. One of them was, we probably ought to do a survey of the citizens, because part of it's figuring out, what do you want in a community center, what should community center be, and then there's bringing like an architect on to give you some ideas. And so we have some documents. We haven't had a chance. We met last Thursday when our meeting was. And anyways, we'll put something together and come back. In the interest of time, we are interested in doing that. But we want to come back with some steps that we think make sense to move forward.
John, may I add another point to this topic?
Sure.
I had a realtor call, someone I know, who was interested in the Al Cafe site for his own investment purposes. But he didn't want to pursue it because he knew that Hura had an interested
before. And I thought it was a considerate call, and, I told him I would bring the topic back to this board. I've been thinking about it in the last couple of weeks since this discussion started. And we've all felt like the asking price was so much higher than the value of the dirt that it just wasn't of interest. But in the context of a community center, since it's in town, it's in the district, we already own, is it 1.6 acres beside it there?
1.76.
It's a pretty good sized piece, and we own the parking lot next door. And one of the biggest consumers of land for the community center is gonna be the parking lot, not the building. And we already own maybe 40 car parks or something in that lot, and it's adjacent to the city hall's parking lot, so it's walking distance to a community center. So in my mind, the justification for buying that Owl Cafe parcel changed a little bit in thinking about a community center convenient to the community and on the major arterial and inside the district. I've not looked for other sites, but I just want to throw out to all of you that at least personally, my reticence about paying too much for the Owl Cafe has changed a little bit because of the circumstances I just mentioned. So I'd like to have some feedback from you. Should I go back to this realtor and say, maybe we are interested, or should we, I'm happy to disclose who it is if you are interested, because we've used others in the past. But if you're interested, I wonder if we shouldn't ask him to try to take another crack at the lady who owns it and see what happens.
Yeah, we can't take action on that, Steve, it's not an action item on here, but certainly I agree with you as I've looked around the district and looked at opportunities, that
Do
that
we
is.
need to have an action item to engage a realtor?
Yes.
Yeah,
We do.
but if you reach out to the realtor and say, hey, would you send the information to us, then we can go ahead and get it into our agenda next month and we can have that conversation.
You all wanna pursue it? Interested enough? Should I tell him to?
We can't
We
do a
can't-
formal
we can't
vote
do
like that, yeah, we should have this as an action item.
Sounds like there might be a warm and fuzzy.
Well,
I think I could
your
include-
general property acquisition opportunities
That's not
is
good
on
enough.
there, but that, we
Yeah,
can't have an
that's not
action
good
item,
enough.
it's just.
No, I'm just
Discussion.
looking for some signals of interest.
I can say that next month's agenda, if I understand somebody might be interested in selling the Owl Cafe, I could put an agenda item on there. So, how's that? So we could discuss it. Okay, we've got literally like minutes to break these tables down and everything so the city council can come in. Really appreciate everything you guys do here. Good conversations, good discussions.